Happy Friday evening, parish orphans and retrogrades. Timothy Gordon here, bringing you another episode of Rules for Retrogrades. Tonight, we're going to talk about Pope Francis. Pope Francis, number 266, who has done two things that I want to talk to you, and they're conceptually related, both related to the specter condemned roundly and flatly by Roman Catholicism, communism. And they're conceptually related insofar as they are the communists, whether of the Marxist brand or just generally speaking, those who brandish the flag of Marxism, the number one opponent of the church over the last 150 years. Now, the two topics we're going to talk about tonight are Pope Francis and China, the CCP, who seems to be really powerful, able to call shots in their corner of the world, which is a large corner because they're a huge geographic area, and in the Far East, where they're the muscle, and also all around the globe. And the recently recertified Vatican China deal has had widespread implications. They're published earlier this week, midweek, in a way that during the re-upping, we're getting to now see more of the details than we got to see the first time this thing was published years back, a couple years back. So that's really important. Number two, I'd like to start out with number two item, second thing first, which is the support that is now being insinuated by Francis for UBI, Universal Basic Income. Austin Ivory, however you say his name, papal biographer, liberal Catholic, I think he's English actually, Austin Ivory, who wrote the Pope's recent book, Let Us Dream, endorses the concept, and he's leading an online discussion. He led an online discussion Thursday. So that's interesting. He led this discussion yesterday, that is to say. Now, let me just read you the first page of this article on National Catholic Register. It's written by friend of this show, Edward Penton. I asked Edward to come on, but he's really busy, and he just said, "Hey, the article says everything I know, but I he's come on the show before. He'll be back, I'm sure." One little known passage in Pope Francis's recently published book, Let Us Dream, is his call to explore the concepts such as UBI, Universal Basic Income, an economic theory whereby the government provides unconditional flat payments to citizens without the need to work. Marxism, plain and simple. Economic support, somewhat akin to UBI, has been practiced for many years by governments through social support mechanisms such as child, elderly, and disability benefits. But the push for something more fully aligned with UBI came closer to reality last year in many jurisdictions, including the United States, with stimulus checks provided in light of the COVID-19 crisis. Just think about this. Think about it, and it will be clear to you that part of the one world government globalist dream is economic Marxism and cultural Marxism. All the norms they stand for are the norms of Marx and the post-Marxists. And of course, there's this undeniable bridge between economic and cultural Marxism. Penton continues, this had prompted some groups to now push for an official UBI program. Proponents of UBI, who include the former presidential candidate Bernie Sanders, the UN Development Program, remember the strong connections and friendship between Pope Francis and Ban Ki-moon, who's a big player at the UN, and the World Economic Forum, notably through its Great Reset project. And we've had insinuations, more and less subtle, by Francis in support of the Great Reset. They all argue that, especially in light of the COVID-19 outbreak, the opportunity should be seized to put it into practice. The alternative of not having UBI is worse, warned the World Economic Forum last April, just after the first COVID lockdowns began in Europe, and predicted in its absence rising likelihood of social unrest, conflict, unmanageable mass migration, and the proliferation of extremist groups that capitalize and ferment on social disappointment. It is against this background that we seriously need to consider implementing a well-designed UBI so shocks may hit, but they won't destroy, the article's authors argued. Critics, however, have called UBI considered a fringe idea. It is a fringe idea. This is just economic Marxism. Income for no pay. It's unjust. It's a violation of justice. A day's pay for a day's work, as the Gospels call it, and, Natural Law, Book 5 of Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics puts it, a day's pay for a day's work, render that this is a fringe idea. A failed, utopian, essentially socialist experiment that actually increases poverty, reduces incentives to work, and ends up harming the vulnerable, whom it is supposed to help. Duh. We ran the early 20th century and all of its fetid experiments in socialism, communism. They also say the policy, which has many forms and was the subject to a great deal of debate in the years just before the COVID-19 outbreak last year, would not only be prohibitively expensive, but also harmful to democracy, whatever that means by democracy. That's not so simple. Okay, the Pope therefore raised eyebrows last April when he appeared to weigh in on the need for UBI during an Easter letter to social movements. Since when do popes write letters? They might write social encyclicals, but when do they write letters to social movements? I mean, this guy, he's one of a kind, number 266. This may be the time to consider a universal basic wage, he said, although his comments were swiftly played down by Cardinal Michael Czerny, the Undersecretary of the Migrants and Refugees section of the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development, who clarified the Pope was referring only to informal workers and that his comments had a more precise scope than UBI. But, according to Penton, who wrote this article, no such ambiguity exists in Let Us Dream, co-written by papal biographer Austin Ivory. The Pope firstly praises work as a right and duty, but then, even though it's a right and duty to work, wonders, quote, what will our future look like when 40 or 50% of young people are jobless? As is now the case in some countries. They're socialist countries, who live under tin pot dictators that where 40 to 50% of the people are out of work. He doesn't mention this. They're the socialist countries that have something like UBI, where everyone lives together in equal poverty. The possibility of high levels of future joblessness has also been raised by the entrepreneur Elon Musk, who believes increasing automation could necessitate UBI. Work, the Pope argues, is not just about earning money, but, quote, self-expression, of taking part in society, of contributing to the common good. But too often, he writes, the world has it the wrong way around and says that despite creating value, workers are treated as the most expendable elements of an enterprise, while some shareholders, with their narrow interest in maximizing profits, call the shots. But I mean, that's just how a business is structured, right? That's the share that they hold. Whether you like it or you don't like it, it's not that some businesses are run this way, Pope Francis. All businesses are run such that shareholders are the ones who hold the share and therefore the discretionary authority to make decisions in the company. Yes, they also are the ones who are literally and figuratively invested in the company. So, I mean, that's just how companies work. Unless subsidiarity, the Catholic principle that governs really what's moral and what's immoral in terms of scope of government. Large government is immoral. Small government is, generally speaking, moral, with exceptions. I mean, the Catholic Church, in propounding subsidiarity, it's a term that first makes an appearance in 1931's encyclical Quadragesimo Anno, is by definition the idea that it is morally grave matter, it is evil for the government to do at a wider valence or a wider scale what could be done at a narrower scale, more local, closer to home. And this includes, in this sense of government, the household. Nothing, in other words, should ever be done by a less local government if generically that kind of governing function can be taken care of more locally, including as local as the home. So that is grave matter, as according to Pope Pius XI in Quadragesimo Anno. He created the word subsidiarity in the 1931 encyclical, but the term goes back to Bellarmine, Suarez, the School of Salamanca, guys like Juan de Mariana, well before that to Thomas Aquinas, who says that not all virtue should be mandated and not all vice should be proscribed. And Thomas gets this idea from early on, even book 5 of the Nicomachean Ethics by Aristotle. So we have set limits. Pope Francis is not free to reimagine that government might morally be allowed, licitly be allowed to be large enough to facilitate something like universal basic income. That's always and everywhere wrong, according to the really clear principles that the church has articulated on this in its bimillennial tradition, particularly in the last millennium, most especially in the last century. I can't tell you how many encyclicals say socialism is an always and everywhere categorical evil. You know, different strains of capitalism, which is very poorly defined. Some of them are immoral, others are not. I mean, and this isn't even a real term. Capitalism is a term for free enterprise, it's an epithet, a hate term, coined by its greatest enemy, Karl Marx. Why do we use his term all the time? So there are different strains, many different strains of free enterprise. And some of them are illicit by the church. Many of them are. Many of them are less licit. But a categorical evil, you can never do it, is socialism, what Pope Francis is pushing. So that's a great article in the Register by our friend Edward Penton. And it's highly concomitant to the article, to the series of facts that I'd like to just lay bare before you tonight regarding the Chinese Communist Party and its incredibly corrupt deal with the Vatican. And by corrupt, I mean they are getting the best deal since, Obama signed the Iran deal, right? The Vatican gave away everything, assuming that they want to protect the interest of Catholic Chinese, Christian Chinese like the Uyghur, and that they want to get as much for those Christians in China as they can. I'm not so sure, right? I mean, the Pope's motivation have appeared entirely nefarious. So I'm not even sure that they want to help to the extent that they can. But assume, we don't want to be guilty of rash judgment here on rules for retrogrades. So we're going to assume that the Pope has the best intentions and he's just very, very poor at bargaining, because I don't want to be guilty of something in this almost sacramentless time of sin that would force me to go to confession. Really quickly, I'll take a pause before we get into the China section of the show, and I'd like to give a plug to the new 2 classes up on timothyjgordon.com. They're now open for enrollment. Go click enroll, and you will be able to quickly and easily see, number 1, the new church history class that will be opening with the spring. You can go sign up for it now. It starts in less than 2 months in mid-April. It's backed by popular demand because in the fall semester of the course, we had no more room. The thing maxed out close to 200, and we didn't want to do a big 500-person class. If you're having a hard time, there's a set price on the thing, but we offer financial aid. We'll work with you if you're an extreme case. It's more important to people to learn church history, to be able to apply it to this strange day in the church. The other class is Rules for Retrogrades on my most recent book, or until April anyway, my most recent book. About the time the class starts, the new book, No Christian Feminism, will come out. The book is 40 Rules of Right-Wing Community Organizing, and it's called, as this program is, Rules for Retrogrades. Bop. So it's 40 rules we're just going to go through in 10 weeks 4 classes per week. I've never given this class before, but it was requested by many, many people. And I said, hey, I want to go ahead and indulge the Vox Populi here. So we'll do just a quicker 10-week course. It's a cheaper course. We're going to run through four rules per week. It should be a lot of fun. So rules for retrogrades and church history, both up now. Just click enroll on timothyjgordon.com. Also, I'd like to give a quick plug to Real Estate for Life. Here on this program, especially because of my strongly expressed views in Catholic Republic, where it's all about balkanize, get yourself to an area of the country where it's as close to a res publica, a place where you believe in the same principles as your neighbors without having to check. That's a real republic. You need to move. We need to gather. We need to basically get an in parallel economy to the left, because they're using the mark of the beast. So we're going to need to get our own social media, maybe our own banks, maybe our own markets, who knows. And to do that, we need to be near each other. So we need to balkanize. Then we need to nullify the tyrannical, infanticidist laws that are coming down from all 3 federal branches. To do that, we got to live together. If you live in a blue state, you got to move to a red state. It's very simple. Do that today, or start the process by calling Real Estate for Life. It's faith-based real estate, and most of them are Catholics. They're all pro-life, and they're going to help you today. Mention my name, and they will be thrilled to work with you. Real Estate for Life. It's a perfect plug, and it's a perfect fit when they came to me, because I'm always telling people to move. Do it by contacting a pro-life real estate agent today. Okay, so the report that gave rise to this show, not as recent, earlier in the week, not as recent as the Universal Basic Income report regarding Austin Avery and the Pope, is this one also on National Catholic Register, called Vatican Not Mentioned in China's New Rules on Bishops' Appointments. Let me say one exciting application of church history to current events. And it's only exciting. It's a bad thing, but it's exciting, I think, for people who are in my church history course and people who are thinking of joining the church history course, which is all of you, hopefully. You ought to be able to see that ready application. When we study the medieval church, the late medieval church, we will say quite distinctly that the 3 main problems confronting the church are lay investiture, simony, and problems with celibacy, right? The old struggle is number 3. Simony and lay investiture have much to do with what we see today in China, except as they were designated the worst problem of the medieval church, they were much less grave. What they are is the laity having an investiture, being invested in who becomes bishop. You see where this is going? Now, in the Holy Roman Empire, the late fading, corrupted Holy Roman Empire, though it was still all Catholic. It was still a bunch of Catholics, nobles who were Catholic that didn't want to destroy the church. Maybe they were being irresponsible and they wanted their kids to be either, high-ranking clerics, or they wanted to have a family friend who already was a cleric get elevated to the episcopate. That's not great. That's not the most noble element in human nature, is it? But at least they were real Catholics. It was government by Catholics for Catholics. It was the Holy Roman Empire. It wasn't the number one enemy on earth, communist government, having a say in who became our bishops. This is why you need to know church history. But so that's a preliminary word. According to new rules, which will reportedly take effect on May the 1st, in 2.5 months, China's state-run Catholic Church and Bishops' Conference will select, approve, and ordain Episcopal candidates with no mention of the Vatican's involvement in the process. This is not to be believed. It's horrifying. It's shocking. Even for 2021, clown world, dystopia, even for Pope number 266 for his pontificate, this is still shocking stuff. It's not to be believed. China's new administrative measures for religious clergy will go into effect on May the 1st. The rules were translated by the magazine Bitter Winter, which reports on religious freedom conditions in China. Under the new rules, the state-run Chinese Catholic Patriotic Association, the CCPA, just like the CCP, which is cute, will be responsible for selecting Episcopal candidates. The candidates will then be approved and consecrated by the Chinese Catholic Bishops' Conference. The rules do not mention any role of the Vatican in approving bishops, despite the 2018 Vatican-China agreement reportedly involving both Chinese authorities and the Holy See in the process of appointing bishops. Let me pause there. It's simony, lay investiture, some sort of mashup of these two as the largest, most prominent, most aggressive problem of the medieval church. It's a doppelganger of that, except way, way worse. Assuming that the Vatican still has the controlling interest in which Chinese clergy become bishops, right? Assuming that it's 70% Vatican controlled and 30% CCP, communist controlled, which is horrible. That still identifies it, designates it as something that would be on par with the worst problem in the medieval church. Do you understand how stark I'm trying to make this for you? Am I making this point starkly enough? I can't tell. But it's not even that. There's no indication, this is the recent report, less than a week old, there's no indication that the Vatican has even 1% of control. Now, we're not sure. I'm not an investigative reporter. I'm just, this is my decided opinion after looking at these articles and reading these journalists who made it sound like it's 100% Chinese Communist Party designated bishops. So this, you can't even use the name like lay investiture to designate this major, humongous problem. It's 10 times bigger. Maybe it's 50 times bigger because it's all the government of China selecting the bishops, according to my read of this news. And this is why it made a big splash 4 days ago. Secular news outfits on the right were covering it. So let's say it's 25 times a bigger problem than lay investiture, just because of the share of interest. It's not 50-50 or anything like it. Vatican holds no interest. But then take that 25 times bigger and multiply it times 10. Might be a little exaggerative now. I don't think so. Multiply times 10, because instead of being the Catholic Church run Holy Roman Empire that was getting involved, and usually the nobles therein, that was getting too involved in the affairs of the episcopate, designating who will be bishop. Now it's the worst enemy of the church on earth. So that's at least 10 times bigger. So 25 times 10, it's at least 250 times a bigger issue. I don't think I'm being that exaggerative, than the worst problem in the medieval church. And like the human mind isn't even really wired to comprehend the consideration of an already big problem, like it was a big problem in the medieval church, and then multiply that times 250. You can't even sense or intuit what a big problem that is, but you can try. In 2018, the Vatican reached an agreement with the Chinese government on the appointment of bishops. The terms of the agreement, which was renewed in October 2020, for 2 more years, have never been fully revealed. So the interesting thing, we did a show on this in October. Then we did a show on China a couple weeks back, probably 2.5, 3 weeks back. These are our last 2 shows on China. We did a late October show in the run up to the election on China, because they re-upped the deal. Maybe it was early November, even first week in November, that we were all in election mode. Who wasn't? And then we did one about 2.5 to 3 weeks ago on China. And we were predicting, to be fair, a lot of this ickiness, but we weren't predicting that the Vatican has no say. As it now appears, I'm not 100% certain, but it appears the Vatican has no say and has traded over its holy birthright to nominate bishops to the Chinese Communist Party. Staggering, staggering stuff. So, and this, by the way, this last week, the breaking details of not only the recertified agreement 2 years later, but the original agreement in 2018. We never had a peek. Apparently, even the journalists had no such peek at the details. Remember, this is the Pope of Dialogue, Francis now. the Pope of transparency, you know, the great pontificate of having the smell of the sheep. And what has he done? But it's the cardinals like faithful, heroic Cardinal Zen, and presumably the Uyghur and the really white martyrdom, sometimes red martyrdom, faithful Chinese who want nothing other than to be on the bark, the Catholics in China, who are persecuted by their worst enemy, their government, the Chinese Communist Party. And you have your Peter, your supreme leader, cutting deals which do more than sell you down the river. I mean, that we, you know, think of what that image entails. It's more than just being sold down the river. It is, you know, it's a deal basically to completely divorce you from any authentic exercise of your faith, because these are not real bishops. The church cannot trade away its patrimony. Part of its patrimony is its ability to nominate bishops. It can't do this. According to reports, however, the agreement allows for China's state-sanctioned church, the CCPA, to select episcopal candidates who would then be approved or vetoed by the Holy See. At the time the Vatican-China agreement was renewed in October, a Vatican newspaper reported that 2 Chinese bishops were appointed under the regulatory framework established by the agreement. The Vatican confirmed in November that a 3rd bishop had been appointed under the regulatory framework of their agreement. I'm going to take some questions at the end of this, so stick with me here, guys. The agreement, by the way, was undertaken to help unite the state-run church and the underground Catholic Church. An estimated 6 million Catholics are registered with the CCPA, while several million are estimated to belong to unregistered Catholic communities which have remained loyal to the Holy See. It needs to be noted here in passing that China has been demolishing churches, literally, during this time period, abducting underground bishops. They'll go vanishing, and Catholics as well, and editing the Bibles to be more in line with communist values, which is straightforwardly the anti-gospel. They're editing the gospel to be in line with the anti-gospel. When I heard this, I said, what is this, Ephesians 5 and an American missile, where they literally cut out, I mean, the outright communists aren't the only ones who do it, or at least ways not the Chinese communists. The United States Conference of Catholic Bishops have allowed the editing of Ephesians 5 when it says that wives must obey their husbands. We've talked about that a great deal on this show. We'll talk about it a great deal more in a couple of months when No Christian Feminism comes out. But it's really extreme stuff. According to the new rules, once a new bishop is consecrated, the CCPA and the state-sanctioned bishops conference will send his information to the state administration for religious affairs. Doesn't get much spookier than that. If you're the guy who just had his name taken, his card pulled, I can't imagine this. We're not being very good to our own here. We're just not. I mean, and people like me who care about the Chinese, and people like my friend Jason Jones who care about them, we're disempowered to make the changes that Pope Francis can make. I mean, he can just come up with good deals for them. That's so creepy, as this information said. Registration of clergy, by the way, in a database is a key part of the new administrative measures under which clergy in China will also be required to promote the values of the Chinese Communist Party. The values of the Chinese Communist Party, until it stopped 5 years ago, was the required 1 child per household policy. And according to their own numbers, this amounted to nearly 0.4 billion forced abortions. What happens if you live in China, if you lived in China, and I stopped this 5 years ago or something like that, if you had a second baby and you were found out, they had forced an abortion on you. They did this over almost 400 million times to 400 million babies. World War II pales in comparison in its death count. Even Stalin pales in comparison. And right after they force you to have an abortion, they sterilize you. This is the gravest matter. This is the gravest concern that any pope could possibly take up. And Pope Francis doesn't care. These are his buddies. Remember what he said 6 or 7 years ago? He's known lots of good Marxists, is what he said. You can't write this stuff. You can't write this stuff. To promote the values of the Chinese Communist Party. Well, I guess Pope Francis likes universal basic income. That's why I covered that at the outset of this show. I guess, hey, they're kind of his people. He's met a lot of good Marxists. Remember when he accepted that cross made out of a hammer and sickle, and we got a kind of dishonest account, even from some right-wing Catholic papers on, I think it might have been National Catholic Register. Don't, you know, if I'm wrong, don't hate me. But he received a hammer sickle cross from a communist, and we were told he said, "Oh no, this isn't good," or something like that. And instead, he gave some sort of ratificatory remark, meaning essentially the opposite. This isn't bad. This is who he is. So are the pieces starting to fall in line to make a little more sense for you that Pope Francis thinks there are a lot of good Marxists. He likes the Marxist economy, right? Universal basic income is the Marxist economy. And he's definitely not bothered by the forced abortions that much. Look, he's given them a sweetheart deal 2 times in a row. This is also consistent with one of the first major statements he made as Pope, that in the West, we're talking way too much about abortion. It's all starting to add up. Oh, it's been adding up for a while now, if we can be fully honest. Whew. So it's just weird times. I mean, but you know what the weirdest thing that could be in 2021? I'm not just saying this. What would be the weirdest thing is if stuff just went back to normal. I mean, how odd would it be if the church started saying Catholic things, you know, you can't contracept. You know, they kind of talk about abortion now, but they talked about it at the appropriate volume. Men and women are different. Wives, stay home and look after your husbands and your kids. Husbands, you know, don't contracept, don't use porn, go to work hard, and come home and be fun, holy exemplars for your wife and your kids. You're the priest of the household. Oh, and by the way, clerical priesthood. We need celibate, you know, men with heterosexual impulses that have become celibate and manly, and this is the higher vocation, and everyone's going to look up to you because you guys are manly, tough, holy dudes. And the church needs to evangelize the world, the whole world, and make the whole world as Catholic as it can possibly be by showing them that not only do we have loving hearts, but we have the one true faith. I mean, how weird would it be if you heard this from a pope? That's just sort of the basic missiology of the church. The basic mission of evangelization is, look, we want to make as much of the world through free will and free intellect, through free conversion, not through the sword like Islam, but through evangelization, the Great Commission of Jesus. We want to make the world as Catholic as it can possibly be. We're going to go town to town. We're going to bring the true gospel. We're not going to water down the gospel. We're not going to pull Ephesians 5 out so as not to offend the Susans who run, you know, the parish council, right? Yeah, wives, you have to obey your husbands, just like the Bible says in about 12 places. And no, this is not at all convivial or conformable to communism or socialism. It's not at all. And they're our enemies and they're going to hate us, the communists. But we will, as Pius X, we will, as he said, we will really fight against modernists of all stripe. We are the church. We're going to take the gospel everywhere, give them the true chance to convert to the true gospel. And if they don't, we'll kick the dust from our feet and we'll go on. The whole world, 100.0% will not be converted, but we want to try for all 100% of those souls, to get them to be Catholic. If I heard that, I would just think I'm in some weird dream, a dream that reality should be reflective of. But I wouldn't believe it. I mean, any more than I'd believe it if like America returned to acting like a republic that valued, the moral purpose of liberty and states' rights. I just wouldn't believe it. It's too weird. So that's that. One example I'd like to point out in fine is that Article 3 of the administrative measures of this sweetheart deal that the Vatican gave to China states that clergy should love the motherland, support the leadership of the CCP, meaning support these people that are, up until very recently were killing their babies and who hate the Catholic Church. Support the socialist system. This is like requiring formal cooperation with grave matter. The Catholic Church has said socialism is inherently wrong. You can't say support socialism or Nazism or Manichaeism or Arianism. So the Vatican just signed a deal that's the equivalent of saying, okay, Catholics, you guys have to agree to support the Arians. You have to agree to support socialists. You have to agree to support Nazi. No, these are evil positions. Look what it's doing. It's cutting the throats of its own beloved children. Support the socialist system and adhere to the direction of the Sinicization of religion in China. Sinicize means to China-ize. And what they mean by this is to communize the religion. Communism wants to eradicate all religion. So to communize or Sinicize the religion means to make religion that isn't really religion. Okay. Now I get where Pope Francis, who whether you, I'm not saying he's not Pope. Assume he's Pope number 266. But this is his agenda. This is the St. Gallen Mafia agenda, man. This is it. It's literally to Sinicize or to communize the true gospel into a false gospel. That's what the St. Gallen Mafia said they want to do, almost chapter and verse. Remember Cardinal Walter Brandmuller. Yes, I've been going back to this a lot lately. In 2014, he said the goal of the St. Gallen Mafia, who gave us Francis in 2013, nearly gave him to us as early as 2005, which is really creepy because no one knew who he was 4 or 5 parts. And it was all just basically Sinicizing religion, communizing religion. Give communion to the divorced and civilly remarried. Make women deacons and maybe priests eventually, I forget. Or eradicate celibacy in the Western Church. Have intercommunion with the Lutherans. In other words, ecumenize things, not where Protestants become Catholic again, but where Catholics become Protestants again. And then once you're Protestant, you're just part of the kind of post-Enlightenment culture, and you're fast secularizing Christianity, liberalism simpliciter within a couple of generations. That's why Francis likes China. I don't know what the connections are, but they are bountiful, my friends. The connections, conceptually speaking, between Francis and China. McCarrick was a special envoy to China. He had a lot to do there. He was trained in St. Gallen. He was trained in St. Gallen, where the Chinese had like communist training camps, according to Church Militant. China. There's a special Vatican relationship that arose with the St. Gallen Mafia's chosen pontificate, Francis, who share the economic and, dare I say, even the cultural and moral views of Sinicizing religion. That means eradicating religion within each religion. You see how all these points, I'm not telling you I'm the one that can literally link them all up with specificity for you. I hate it when people promise more than they can deliver and say that they're more specifically on point than they are. But you see how there's a constellation of facts here that are beginning to take more shape now. I hope you see this. Sincerely, I hope you see this. So I've adverted to Quadragesimo Anno. So in closing, I'm just gonna read you some passages from Quadragesimo Anno, the 1931 encyclical by Pius XI, which gave us the concept of subsidiarity. Subsidiarity, you could just say anti-socialism, is the main teaching of the church on social teaching. For all intents and purposes, localism, any kind of aggrandizement of power and centralization of power and forced blank upon local peoples, local endemic peoples, are condemned. That we, in keeping with our fatherly solicitude, may answer their petitions, we make this pronouncement, whether considered as a doctrine or a historical fact or a movement, socialism, if it remains truly socialism, even after it has yielded to truth and justice on the points which we have mentioned, kind of like synicization of religion, cannot be reconciled with the teachings of the Catholic Church because its concept of society itself is utterly foreign to Christian truth. Let me read that last clause again. Socialism cannot be reconciled with the teachings of the Catholic Church because its concept of society itself is utterly foreign to Christian truth. This is a big deal that such a thing appears in such an important encyclical as Quadragesimo Anno. In the world of encyclicals, papal encyclicals, not all encyclicals were created equal. Some are much more important than others. Some have magisterial weight, others have none. The practice of synicization has been announced and implemented by President Xi Jinping in recent years. Critics have called the plan an attempt to force religious practice under the control of the Chinese government and in line with the values of the CCP. This is what I was saying earlier. In addition, clergy are expected under the rules to operate to maintain national unity, religious harmony, and social stability. So they're keeping the Catholics under the thumb of the Chinese Communist Party. Think of that line from Quadragesimo Anno by faithful Pope Pius XI and now Pope Francis I. They are opposites. Registered members of the clergy in China will not be allowed to organize, host, or participate in unauthorized religious activities held outside the authorized activity of religious activities, and will not be permitted to preach in schools other than in religious schools. Registered clergy must belong to one of China's state-run religions. State-run religions. Pastors of home churches or underground churches will not be permitted to be registered clergy. Entering places of worship should be regulated through strict gatekeeping. This is a dystopian, Orwellian like fiction, isn't it? You know, it's not actually. I wish it were. Strict gatekeeping, verification of identity, and registration, says the document. The rules also call for a religious clergy training program for the, quote, political education of religious clergy. They're just making their Catholic priests into propagandists of the state. Political education of religious clergy, as well as their cultural education. Clergy should also be judged on their behavior with a system of rewards and punishments in place. Think of Snowball and Napoleon, the two pigs that run the animal farm, when you think of systems of reward and punishment. Old Snowball and Napoleon from George Orwell's Animal Farm. Now, the Pillar, which is J.D. Flynn and Ed Condon's new place of publication. New China rules, troubling but not aimed at Vatican deal, say Chinese clerics. The text makes no reference to the Holy See and includes the explicit provision, according to this article, that clerics are forbidden from being dominated by foreign forces, accepting the appointment of teaching positions by foreign religious groups or institutions without authorization, and other acts that violate the principle of independence and self-administration of religion. We make a real mistake if we think this is all about us. One senior cleric in China told the Pillar that they're making a mistake if they think it's about them, the church. It's about China too. By and large, Catholics are not seen as a national problem by the Chinese government. with the exception of particular locales and individuals. So according to these compromised company men, the CCP selected clerics, communism doesn't hate Christianity suddenly. The two aren't averse. Well, official Catholic teaching accepted by the magisterium of the church disagrees. One can't be a communist and a Catholic. Okay? It's that simple. One can't be a communist and a Catholic. Whew. Article 16 in the new rules is exclusively about Catholics and specifically on the nomination process of bishops done by the Chinese Catholic Patriotic Association, the CCPA, and the Chinese Catholic Bishops' Conference, but no mention is made. This other article repeats from the first article. No mention is made of the Holy See, which would contradict the terrible deal from the Vatican. Okay, so this is why did I open up with universal basic income support by Pope Francis? Because it's communism. Why am I hearkening back to Uncle Ted McCarrick? Well, one, because we should never forget him and what happened. But also because he was buddies, very chummy with the Chinese Communist Party. Okay? And you see how the constellation is becoming clear? It's not perfectly clear, but it's clear enough. This is a turkey shoot. This is a sellout. I'll take questions from you guys if you'd prefer.
We have a question from Thomas. Do you think Francis will make the CCP Vatican deal public?
The full published Vatican CCP deal, probably not. We knew very little the first time it was ratified, and now we know a little more. I'm surprised we know this much.
Somebody's asking what a Peronist is.
What is a Peronist? A Peronist is a supporter of the dictator Juan Perón, who was basically a South American Machiavellian politician who used rules very similar to Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals, rules very similar to Machiavelli for taking, commandeering, and maintaining power. He's not associated really with the left or the right, unlike a lot of Latin American dictators. He's associated with incrementalism, like Pope Francis, with weaponized ambiguity, like Pope Francis. Pope Francis was a supporter in his earlier days, we're told. You know, some Francis defenders try to make that point squirrely. But you see a lot of the tactics of Perón in Francis's pontificate. It's Machiavellian stuff.
We have some general questions. Somebody's saying the Catechism says love is wishing some of the good. What is the good? Thanks.
The good. Well, the good is the last ultimate end, which is happiness for its own sake, for your neighbor. So a pure wish for love is a pure wish for Greek eudaimonia. True happiness, not just pleasure, but a moral kind of happiness. Sorry about that. A moral kind of happiness that all of us seek to have. It's the goodness behind all the other goodnesses. If you get an A on a paper, why are you happy? Because it'll help you get an A in the class. Well, why are you happy about that? It'll help you get a good overall GPA. Why are you happy about that? It'll help you get into a better college or grad school. Why are you happy about that? There's always something behind that something, because we're not talking about the kind of happiness that equates to eudaimonia. Only the last final good that's good for its own sake is eudaimonia, the true natural law and supernatural law, happiness. And love is wishing this for anyone.
There's two questions that might go together. It says, Tim, do you believe the Pope has ceased being the Pope? Per St. Robert Bellarmine, the Pope, manifestly a heretic, ceases by himself to be Pope. And then Margot asks, how does this all work with apostolic succession?
No, I don't believe he ceased being the Pope. And I know Bellarmine says that. Well, look, I hold to Bellarmine where Bellarmine, his teachings are reflected in the magisterium. So like what people have to understand is that the doctors of the church, just because they all have writings that are important, and it's very important that they can be speculative theologically or philosophically. So there's like, think of it like a Venn diagram. There's areas of overlap. Most of the great doctors added to or clarified Christian teaching. That's what makes them doctors. But then all of them have stuff that's wayward. So Bellarmine is alone with a couple other, maybe Francis de Sales, a couple other thinkers that have this relatively low threshold for a pope to stop being pope. And none of, aside from maybe one or two, none of the other doctors and the magisterium itself did not accept that. So no, is he a bad pope? Obviously, he's one of the worst. Please just, let all of our popes get to heaven, including Pope Francis, but please just let this end. But yeah, he's still very much pope, until proven otherwise.
Somebody's asking, is it safe to assume that the communist beer bug was leaked to cause election mayhem to allow president voter fraud to oust Trump? Oh, that's Ben Starnes.
Yeah, there's enough information out there if you know where to look to come up. Most people, if you have to ask, you'll never know, and if you ask, you probably have a good idea what the answer to the question is.
Margot's question about succession, apostolic succession. She's wondering how this all works with that.
Well, apostolic succession is what makes the worst bishop in the world a valid prince of the church, whereas the best, most loving, most sincere Protestant pastor does not pass muster as in the succession of the apostles. It simply means that there's a line of kings. Who are the kings? Well, it's the apostles. The apostles are, they all kind of hand down their lineage, and then more dioceses, more jurisdictions were created, and those are valid as well because they all were created under one apostle or another. So apostolic succession just means, we could have 90% good bishops. We could have 90% wicked bishops, but the point of apostolic succession is that it's one of the four marks of the church. It just means that we have a means of qualifying apostolic legitimacy, meaning episcopal legitimacy. You see, it's not a means of qualifying whether or not a bishop is a good or a bad bishop. It's just whether or not they are a bishop. So again, the worst, pick your least favorite bishop in the world today. Oh, I have so many good candidates, right? They're still a real bishop because of apostolic succession. It's a line, an unbroken line from the apostles that makes Jesus one true church, the Catholic Church with the partial communion of the Eastern Orthodox churches. Those are true bishops as well. Whereas the best Protestant minister in the world, who might be a really good man, a sincere man, and probably a sincere believer in Christ, he doesn't share that lineage, even if he's a better dude than a given bishop. You see, think of the Duke and the Dauphin in Huckleberry Finn. They're pretenders to some royal blood. They're pretending that they're in the line. Once the line's broken, it's not real.
Somebody's asking, when is your book on infiltration coming out? You might want to explain what that is. And I heard you say somewhere that you were also writing one. Yeah.
So originally, Taylor Marshall and I were writing his book we're planning to write a book, became his book Infiltration, based on just our past shows, which is what his book Infiltration really was. So it was basically our first 3 months of shows together. Plus he did a little, a few weeks of extra research on top of what our shows were. But originally we were going to write it together. It was decided between, Marshall, me, and Sophia that we just split it up and do 2 books, which were somewhat time staggered. So the first book, so Sophia did contract me to write a kind of infiltration companion piece, which I am doing. And I have researchers that are on this now. But instead, Sophia said, well, let's get out your feminism book to let some time pass. And that's what we're doing. And that book will be out in April. The other one will be out later. On TAN, later in the year, I'll have out the Vatican II book.
Margot's just asking again, it's like she just one clarification that CCP breaks the line though, doesn't it, for succession? The CCP thing.
Oh yeah, I wasn't understood. That is a, a simple but a technical canonical question. I'm not sure about. It's not black and white, that part.
Tim, is the list of popes down through history that are listed as anti-popes legitimate?
The anti-popes aren't legitimate. I'm not sure. Starting with Hippolytus and there's been, I forget how many there've been, 12.5 or something.
And somebody's asking what priestly fraternal orders are less tainted at the bishop level.
At the bishop level, I don't know exactly. I mean, obviously, people know they can trust their FSSP parishes and CKSP. I mean, look, the big question is not, oh, let me go somewhere, let me move somewhere where it's a good bishop. I know that's intuitive, but the big question is, why do we have such pervasion of the episcopate? And it's because this was planned, and things that you've heard me talk a great deal about. It's a planned infiltration of the episcopate. We got to turn that around, rather than, oh, I'm going to go to the 3 jurisdictions that have like dynamite American bishops. That's not the right token. Then you're just looking out for yourself. If you're looking out for the church, we need to address the root of the problem insofar as we can address it.
Someone's saying, thanks, Tim. Do you think that some of the news reports we're hearing regarding the CCP and the Pope is hyped up somewhat specifically to try to cause further divide within the church?
No, I don't. I do not. There's not really a big market for that kind of hype up. It's just, and also the news reports are kind of inside baseball. It's not the kind of stuff that's coming out on every, it's not CNN breaking, MSNBC, Fox News. It's more inside baseball for the very small portion of even faithful Catholics that are interested in this stuff. So no, that's not the kind of fertile ground you usually see for kind of shoddy salesmanish reporting. I don't. Look, God bless you guys. We need to fight. We need to fight in the ways we can. Oh, this is a huge attack. We talk about it every night. I get sick of it. I like to be positive or silly about some things, because if you don't laugh, you cry. But when we talk about Pope Francis, it's always bad. It's always shocking. It's always shocking on some new, accelerating, heightening level. And I don't know what to say about that. That's just weird. It's weird that he can even outpace himself and shock us, who couldn't have much lower or worse or weirder expectations for him. It's odd. But hey, you got to fight. Do what you can do. Like, I mean, it doesn't have to be for me, but I am plugging my own classes. People, ask someone that's taken a class from me on timothyjgordon.com, whether it's Aristotle's Ethics or Church History or my Catholic Republic class. Now we're going to have Rules for Retrogrades class and a new Church History class. The Church History class is perfectly timed for all this stuff. It's starting in less than 2 months. Enrollment's open now. Go to timothyjgordon.com and click enroll. It's going to be dynamite. I should get some testimonials for you guys. People are pretty thrilled with the way Aristotle and church history have gone. What's that?
I was just saying, people were asking about your books, and I was like, I just actually finished mine just 2 days ago.
Steph's book, Ask Your Husband, is finished in its first draft. We're doing an authorial edit. She asked me to help look over it. We're going to give that book to Tan, hopefully within a week. And they have pretty quick output. So that book will not be out before No Christian Feminism, my book with my brother Dave on feminism, which will come out in April. But it'll be out not probably too long after that. So you're going to see a lot of books from the Gordons in the upcoming year. No Christian Feminism, which is, I'm not trying to sound silly or cocky or cocksure or anything like that, but it's pretty long awaited, because that book's been done and is for a few different reasons has sat on the publisher's shelf. It's finally coming out in less than 2 months before the new round of Timothy J. Gordon classes come up. The book will be out, No Christian Feminism, and you're going to be seeing me and Dave plugging this book on a lot of Catholic outlets. So get ready. It's going to be wild. It's a book with about 700 footnotes. Compare that to any of the other Catholic books you've read in the last 5 years. And we have more footnotes than almost any of the ones that I know about. So it's not just a couple of guys that are long on opinion. This is church teaching. And it'll blow your socks off. It'll knock your socks off, I guess is the more typical expression. And it's going to be a big deal. And censorship's a really real thing. But after that, expect to see Steph's book out, which is dynamite. It's amazing.
I hope they publish it, because I definitely go after the women folk.
It's aggressive.
So.
Well, but it's also well cited, and it's a woman's perspective on basically the same thing, obedience. And then after that, later in the year, you should see out my Vatican II book. So these are all. It's going to be a big year. It's horrible. 2020 and 2021 are horrible, horrible things, Greg. But you're going to get these Gordon books coming out, and I'm really looking forward to that. I hope you are as well. Join the classes. That's a way to stay positive. People join the Brick Wall group, and the students can fraternize. They're even doing a meeting in person in the summer, which is really cool. It's just good people, and I just have really cool students. All right. God bless you guys. Deus Volt. Stay tough. Be strong. Look out for your brother. We're going to get through this. We're going to get through this. I'm not sure how yet. God bless you. Peace.